All right. Well, I want you guys get to a little bit know about what a small town, small area EOC is like, because most of this country operates this way. We're not all metropolitan areas. We're not all with tons of resources and tons of capabilities. As you can see, I'm from Clearwater County. This is in the north central area of Idaho. And if we get a closer look, and a couple of things we're going to cover a little bit later, Clearwater County has, for the whole county, just a hair over 8,900 people. That's it. Orofino, which is the city center, is just a hair under 4,000. And what's just a fun point here is there is a club here in Orofino. It's called the Clearwater Valley Amateur Radio Club. And with such a small population, they right now have a club roster of 44 active members. So that's kind of cool. I want you to notice this big lake here, and ASEC and Orofino, because we're going to touch on that actually. This is a lake I want you to pay attention to, and ASEC and Orofino. Orofino has a population, like I said, a little under 4,000. All this green area is national forest. So a little over 50% is non-taxed in our county. So our tax base is even small. But what I want to do, I want to go through these slides, and I want you to think. Think about how amateur radio can help in a disaster in each of these scenarios. What tools would you need? What services could you provide in each one of these scenarios? Now, each one of these scenarios are real, already happened. 99% of the pictures are Clearwater County. So let's go through a few things. All right, first one, Dorshak Dam. That's that dam that blocks that lake. That's near ASEC and Orofino. It is the largest or tallest straight access dam in North America. 717 feet, only 3 inches shorter than Hoover Dam. Now, we work, it's a Corps of Engineer dam, and we work extremely closely with them with plans. Because if you look at the dam in the spillway, straight line about 200 yards is the city of ASEC. Not a good place to be if we can have problems. So think about that, and think about, one thing about this dam, it will take out larger cities below too, if it was to go. Now, the odds of that are very low, but we still have to plan for it. 1996 was extremely bad for us. This is not the same river system that the dam's on. This is called Orofino Creek. And we lost a lot of homes, a lot of roads, a lot of everything. Now, I know 96, there was no real cell towers, but imagine if it was today, because it could happen today. What would you do? Timberline High School, it's up by Weehite. Mercury spill. Okay, mercury spill, what can we do to help? Took 9 days to deal with this. Mercury, how did a high school get mercury? It's a fun story, a short story. One of the science teachers kept a plastic jug with mercury in it from miners, because we are a mining area also, that was turning it in to be safe. Kids got it out, and you know how if you play with mercury, how fun it can be. So that's what the mercury spill at Timberline High School was. All right, let's talk fires for a minute. We're going to be on this one for a little while. In Idaho, and particularly North Idaho, fires is a way of life. We have fires every year. We expect them. Some years are better than worse, better than others. 2015 is our worst. It took in 3 counties. It took in Lewis County, Idaho County, and my county. This is just about a half a block, maybe 2 blocks from my office, this picture. Now this fire, just to give you some of the impact, a little over 3,000 total acres burned. 6,000 of those acres were private forests. These are forests that are harvested for lumber. They lost all their economic capability there. 72 homes were lost in the 3 counties, over 200 non-residential structures lost, and 200 miles of fence. What was interesting, we had only a few cell towers here, but they were jammed shut. Why? Because everybody was trying to film and share what was going on social media. So we lost that capability completely. We're lucky though, radios were fine. And then we go to the other extreme. Yeah, this is my county. We got a bunch of University of Idaho students to come and dig out the houses. So think about how radio and ham radios can help serve in these situations. But we go to the other extreme. This is based in Orofino. You can see that first day, which would have been the day, and it was 110 degrees on July 5th, so the day after the 4th of July, and would stay hot. Now, in the 2015 fires, in June, we had 20 straight days of over 100 degrees. That's what kind of set the stage for a bad fire year. And believe it or not, we've been under a tornado warning in Idaho, right here in Clearwater County. It was in the summer. We had to stop a lot of baseball games and Little League and things like that. It was quite interesting. Luckily, nothing touched down. But we do get extreme wind. I don't know why wind likes trailer parks, but they do. And here we are in 2010, November of 2010, about 2 in the morning, we got what's called shear winds from a shelf cloud and just tore the area apart. We lost 100% of our power and about 30% of our communications. And that was in November, about a week before Thanksgiving. Now, for those that are local here, will recognize this. This is Highway 12. Highway 12 is a long road, goes from coast to coast. When it gets to Idaho, comes out of Washington State, comes through our area, follows the Clearwater River, goes right through my town, goes through other towns. And then we get an avalanche, and it surprises some people sometimes. You'll see a semi here being dug out of the Clearwater River or the Loxaw River at this point. And it gets pretty ornery, pretty deep. That's Highway 12. So keep thinking, where does ham radio fit in? Where does helping served agency come in? Back to a little more common here, landslides and floods. We flood a lot. We have landslides a lot. We really, I got a question in chat and I will answer it in a minute. We really do have a mountainous area that gravity is against us and everything wants to go down, including the hillsides. The question that I had, where'd it go? Where'd chat go? Of course, I can't find it now. There it is.
You don't have to answer questions mid-stride. We put those up there so that when he calls for questions, they'll be there.
All right, fair enough. This is my first presentation with you guys, so I'm getting a feel for it. We also have civil unrest and terrorism in our own area. This is right here, Orofino. So you can imagine. We've noticed the country go through more civil unrest. This is going from the big cities, it's merging out. Maybe not as large, but it's moving into towns where we're having more crime, and that's not good. I'm going to take you back to 1980. Mount St. Helens, when it blew, it left an ash cloud, which buried Idaho, just buried it. And it actually did a lot of havoc to radio communications and to transportation. You could not drive your car without changing your air cleaner every day. Quite interesting. So think about that scenario. All right, well, what we're in now, how does ham radio really fit into this and COVID? How do you plug into the services that are already being provided by government agencies? Power failure. It can happen very locally or widespread. If you look at this map, these are the interconnected power grids. And as of last year, this is what it looked like. Notice Texas. What happened to Texas last winter? When they lost power, they couldn't bring in power from anywhere else. They are not, at that time, were not interconnected with any other grid. Something to think about. For us here in the Pacific Northwest, we get a lot of power from nuclear and dams and so on, but we've had as simple as a tree branch go into a particular power grid area and shut down Northern California. You know, and so there's some strange things that can happen out there. Where does ham radio fit in with that? Internet failure. We always have slowdowns. We always have different internet speeds. Broadband is better in some areas than not. And with that in mind, what does ham radio offer? Now, this is the actual backbone of our internet. Now, I want you to look here to the west. You got Portland, Seattle, Victoria, and Vancouver. They are all in an area which is called the Cascadia Induction Zone. We've done exercises about the Cascadia earthquake that could take out all of this in one shot. And that will shut down internet in the Pacific Northwest and into the Dakotas and Montana and so on. And it will slow down everybody else. So it can happen by natural causes. And then let's do EMP and solar flares. There was a really good news article on the ARRL news last Friday about solar flares. But also what happened last Friday, you'll see below, 40 Starlink satellites were lost in 2022. I mean, that's the new internet. Now, we talked about that Cascadia area. Kind of getting off of now what you guys can do to help, but I want to show you some of the problems we suffer in emergency management. In Idaho, as probably in many states, the state's agencies know what we need. And with that in mind, they provide us things. And what they did a few years ago, probably 2012, they put in what was called a thin client. And it was a microwave backbone to every EOC in Idaho that provided computer connection and a VoIP phone connection to the state of Idaho in Boise. We did the Cascadia Rising exercise in 2016. Now, why would Idaho be part of that exercise? Well, if Washington and Oregon gets crashed like it would, we'd have a lot of refugees coming to Idaho. So you can see on the first email, this is actually happening at Clearwater County EOC, my EOC. The state thin client system used by our logistic positions keeps shutting down 4 times in 15 minutes. Don't need to read the whole thing. And here's the response from the state. I've checked into the situation with the EOC network connection for Clearwater County. We have found an actual malfunction in the radio on one of the mountaintops is the particular link. It is not repairable until the next 24 hours. I suggest using an alternate network connection until we can get it repaired. Alternate network connection. We didn't have one. Maybe ham radio could help. Fun sideline. In 2021, late 2021, state of Idaho abandoned the thin clients. It's no longer part of our system. So I want to introduce you to my EOC. I'm really glad you're able to see it, but I'm going to give you a grand tour. So bear with me. I'm actually going to take my camera and show you what a small town EOC looks like. Now, this is a webcam, so it's not the greatest, But you can see this is just my office. I work alone unless I have a disaster. There's a computer I'm working from and just my files. And I'm not a great cameraman, sorry. My little office. I'll get back to these guys in a minute. I'll go out here. And this is where I would house everybody in the first operational period for a response. We've got all sorts of tools. On the far side there, you'll see a book rack. In that book rack is all the instructions on how to deal with whatever issue. You can see, I don't know if you can read it, there's one that says, wildfire, start here. There's a binder for the logistics section chief, one for the finance chief, one for the planning chief. I got public health response over there. I got maps galore. I got boards to write things on, key card, tracking, just all sorts of things. Just a little fun one. I don't know if you can see the radio. That's the results of the 2015 fires and some record books and so on. So with that, that was my EOC. And the reason I wanted to show it to you, it's not really much. We, in the state of Idaho, have 44 counties and 3 tribes that all have EOCs. And with that in mind, not all are full-time. Some work 2 jobs. Example, one emergency manager in Idaho, part-time emergency management. Other, he takes care of all the garbage in the county. Another one, his other half, he's the IT guy. The other one is a planning and zoning or a building inspector and so on and so forth. That's common. Only your big cities will have staff and full-time personnel. I'm lucky, at least I am full-time right now. It took years to get to that point, but realize that full-time emergency managers are busy. They're swamped with all sorts of responsibilities that come out at them. They have a basic cycle they're supposed to follow. They're supposed to build up preparedness and response, then recovery and mitigation, and do it again. They have to deal with grants, finding them and applying for them. They have to go through different issues, and I believe this will answer one of those questions. When we do have a disaster, example, in Clearwater County, in my 17-year career so far, I've had 9 presidential declarations. And there's a lot of interreaction between the federal services, the state services, and anything else we can do to get money to help pay for the recovery or the response. Volunteer management, huge. During the 2015 fires, everybody came out of the woodwork with something or wanting to help. That's great. It puts a big burden on our system sometimes. We do damage assessments, and the faster we can do damage assessments, the faster we can have money. So keep that in mind. Now, once again, I'm going to remind you, these are my opinions, but it's because of my experience. With ham radio and emergency management, it's been a bit of a tug of war. Emergency managers are responsible for a lot of things, even when there's not a disaster. Most disasters don't require communicational support, and I'll explain that in a minute. Large disasters would. But what happens is we get into a bit of tug of war with ham radio operators that know better, that thinks you're doing it wrong, and so on. Just last week, I did a presentation in Boise for all the emergency managers in the state of Idaho. And I introduced them to WinLink. Great show, but the biggest comment I got, and multiple times, was I don't want ham radio operators in my office. They've got attitude. Now, there was a presentation that I really liked on RATPAC Thursday. It was, let me find the date here, the December 11th episode. I'd like you guys to look at that again. I'm not the only one that thinks like this. The problem is a lot of attitude comes like, well, you know, if you really need us, give us a call. We'll come then. No, not at all. In fact, during that Cascadia Rising exercise of 2016, I had ham radio operators who'd never seen my equipment. And I promised to show you my equipment. I'll do that in a minute. They were supposed to contact the state via HF radio, and that failed. It failed because of the state, but also failed because they didn't know how to use that radio. The state forgot that the state of Idaho has 2 time zones. And so they put the check in the mountain times. We are in the Pacific time. So that's something they learned. But I had extra ham radio operators that could not figure out the radios. That was disappointing for me. Also, I had a person, we've been starting up this WinLink net for the state of Idaho, who came to me and says, you know, I could do it with Telenet, but you know, I'm going to wait till I can do it on HF or FM or whatever. No, practice now. In fact, unfortunately, that was a leader that said that. And that's frustrating for us. That's called attitude. It's not that we want everybody to jump out there and do what we say, but I want to provide opportunity so you can interface with the EOC. I would love to have ham radio operators come in, talk with us, tell them what they can do, come in and practice on the nets that we have, on the equipment we have here, and so on and so forth. Build that relationship. And then I would enjoy the opportunity to sit down and write the communication plan for a large event. Once again, small events don't tend to happen where we need ham radio operators, and there's a reason for that. And let's be professional as ham radio operators. We need to be professional. The reason why ham radios have been less needed over the years, and for those that have been around a long time will appreciate this, when 9/11 happened, afterwards, everything changed. Incident command became a mandatory educational part of all first responders. And then all the floodgates opened with gobs and gobs of money to build communication systems. And it's still flowing today. It's still flowing today. So a handheld radio is not necessarily what first responders need help with. So think about that. What can we still do? And you'll notice that I brought up WinLink to my emergency managers, and they love the idea of WinLink. They're just not sure they can have that relationship yet. We're working on that. So ICS, if you're a ham radio operator and you want to start interfacing with the first responders as a served agency, please take ICS 100. Piece of cake online. You know, I would be happy. For one thing, it'll teach you the language. Not only the language, but how we think, how our organizational charts work, where you fit in that organizational chart. These are things that you get on the same page as the first responders, you'll have a better relationship. Now, if you're just getting started in interfacing with EOCs and first responders, get your feet wet, get out there, check on your neighborhoods and other socialization, talk with your neighbors, coordinate, volunteer for boat races and bicycle races and triathlons, and get your skills up there. Because you guys can provide a lot. And when I say you guys, I'm one of those. You know, communications, email, charging stations. Whoever thought of that? You know, believe it or not, look at New York when they go through these events, hurricanes and bad storms that come their way. They lose power and everybody needs their cell phone recharged. This next one, highly localized ground truth reports. That's critical to my work. If I'm going to request funds from the federal government or for the state of Idaho, I need proof and I need accurate results of ground truth. So when you do like a damage assessment, a drive-by or a physical one where you are with an assessor, but you're their communication link and you can go there. What about emergency power? Just emergency power. Image communications, pictures are worth 1,000 words. And here's what I want us to think about. Handheld radios, really, they go buy them every year and they get grant money all the time. It's not where they need help anymore. And I know most of you realize that, but I keep reminding people that your handheld is great to practice with. It's great to do service with. It's great to use. But the first responders, the served agencies, that's not what they're after. What they could really use is WinLink and Wi-Fi meshes. I'm amazed at what you can do with a Wi-Fi mesh. These are two things that you could really bring to the table that will really amaze those that you serve. I think of events that I've been involved with over the years. Being a COML, I've been deployed many times. The first thing leadership wants, they want their phone and their email. Internet next. And yes, satellites are there, but they get jammed. They get too many people on them. So think about that. And here's just one story I always like to share. This is a ham radio operator who took his ham radio skills seriously. You all remember the RV that went down December 25th on 2020, Christmas Day, and blew up by the AT&T building. This ham radio operator lived really close in an apartment near there. He lost all power, he lost phone, everything, internet, the works. What he did, he got his WinLink going. His family wasn't hams. So he remembered, hey, I can send text messages through email to my family. And he did. And he says, hey, this is whoever, and don't, you know, I'm fine, I'm good. He used his ham radio skills for his own purpose, and we can always do that. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop sharing the screen. I have no more slides, but I welcome, we'll go to chat real quick. The first question I've got, I had to ask an emergency manager, well, no, here we go. Does Clearwater County receive federal offset funds to make up for the presence of that much federal land out of the tax base? The answer is no. I had to ask an emergency manager to fire one of our members that we would never have dispatched because this guy was also a member of the EM Auxiliary Communication Service. Not sure I understand why. And then, does the state have an AUXCOMM program that it uses? I can answer that. I'm part of that group that's getting that going. Just had a meeting today. And yes, we're looking to, we've had some AUXCOMM classes already. Difference between ARES and AUXCOMM, the simplest way to put it, ARES has its training program. They go out and do emergency training and grab and go bags and so on and so forth. And AUXCOMM is a FEMA-based training or ICS-based training where you interface better with the first responders. And with that, Dan and anybody else, questions? I hope I didn't offend anybody, but I'm pretty strong opinionated when it comes to the need not to be in charge, but to go out and interface, get to know your emergency managers, provide them services they actually need, and that way they know who you are when a bad day comes.
That is a major problem we have here in Idaho, and I think in most of the states is they got a lot of guys that like to play with the radios and practice for whatever kind of disaster or event they're doing, but they're less, they somehow don't want to get that interface going with the agencies they're working with. That's very common. Tom, you have your hand up. You want to take the floor?
Yes, I just wanted to explain the entry that seemed to make no sense. He was an ARES member. We would have never dispatched him for ARES because we knew he was a problem child. But he was also an AUXCOMM member that we didn't have control of AUXCOMM. Of course, it's not our program. So he got called out as AUXCOMM, and we got called out to help after that. And I see the poor emergency manager kind of pulling his hair out, not literally, because of this guy's conduct. And I said, wait a minute, he's in your sandbox. We didn't bring him here. You have the authority to fire this guy. And no, you're not going to offend every ham operator in the room. They don't like him either. And the guy said, thank you. And the guy was out the door 15 minutes later.
That's a very good example. I'll give another quick example. I had a gentleman come into my office, a ham radio off person, come in and try to tell me how FEMA works and how FEMA comes in. Don't ever call FEMA, he tells me, because they take over. Well, all incidents start local, end local, and I'm sorry, FEMA supports does not run anything. And he was adamant. I haven't seen him since.
Okay, yeah, that's incidentally, for those that don't know, Don is my assistant section nursing coordinator here in Idaho, and happy to have him on board with all of his experience and knowledge and things he's offering here. Okay, are there any more questions? I don't see your hands raised. Barry, are you keeping a track of the chat?
Yeah, there's a couple of more questions in the chat, Don, if you want to check them out.
Okay, I'm looking at them.
Start with Steve.
Steve, let me see. All right, Steve. Has your county agreed to provide workers' comp for deployable volunteers? The answer is yes, provided you've signed a document saying you will follow our policies, you will do X, Y, Z. Example is sandbagging. We get volunteers out the yin yang for sandbags, and that can be dangerous for your back. We do have that capability. We've worked through our attorney general and so on and so forth, our prosecuting attorney, I'm sorry, and built this insurance base for volunteers only, but they must have signed on and agreed to it. Let's see. As a one-person EMA of a county with 3.6 people per square mile, do you feel like you are threatened with the death by 100 paper cuts? All right, Dan. What happens is really hard is a lot of people come and visit. Just come and visit. And I don't want to ignore them because they may have something to offer or may be able to guide them in the right direction. But when we have a disaster like the 2015 fires, literally in the Clearwater County side of things, when they called the state and says, hey, we have a new fire here, where is it? I'm looking out of my window here at the EOC. It was across the street and across the creek. That's very scary. That scares me more than 1,000 paper cuts. So fun little question. Who's going to teach how to build a good Go kit? Maybe several examples. I think that's a great idea. I know my Go kit is styled for my needs. Interesting. And then, yes, there was some other equipment. Let me do that right now. If everybody can see my screen, I'm gonna grab my camera. This is my radio room. It's a desk. I don't know if I'm the main screen or not.
Yep, you're doing fine.
Okay.
You were, now you're not.
Now I'm not. Okay.
I need to put you back in.
Okay. I'll wait for that. There we go. Okay, I can see what we're doing. I got a clock that's on coordinated universal time because of what the state doesn't understand Mountain and Pacific time. I've got a 2-meter radio because that's the basic, all the repeaters that the ham have around here. A digital scanner, my Micron 2ES that I got years ago and works great. And then a Yaesu down here. And I can still use all of it. I've got the computer that I run the WinLink net on right down here. And for those that don't know, state of Idaho now has a WinLink Wednesday net because we're trying to train everybody, ham radio operators, how to really get good at WinLink, because that is one of those things that really, really supports emergency management if we can get that going. More questions? Okay, a direct message there. We're building a network called the Mid-Atlantic Internet Protocol Network with all volunteer efforts and funds. That is awesome. And let me talk about funds for a minute. There's some of you that may be involved with shares, and shares does have its own WinLink frequencies. I'm lucky because I know how to gather things for free sometimes. So many emergency managers in these offices don't have the money for that equipment. You can't go to an emergency manager in probably 2/3 of the emergency managers in Idaho and say, you need to spend $3,000. It's not going to happen. Their grant money is going towards, in fact, the federal grant dollars have changed in terminology of what we can go for. There's a lot of resiliency and equity involved, and regardless of where you're at, it creates new waves of things we have to attack. Cyber is another place we have to spend money on. Okay, Idaho has 2 RMS gateways on the shares ID Nail lab and the state EMA. Soon there will be another shares RMS. Excellent. And unfortunately, shares is not heavy in the emergency management world. I talked to a lot of emergency managers last week. Do you have shares? What's shares? The state holds it a little too close to themselves. Unless you know and go to them, say, I'd like to be a shares member. It's not going to happen. You have people even on this video call who would like to be involved with shares, but their emergency manager has no idea why or what it is or what it's for. So do realize we have some hurdles there. How much do you trust a new operator during an emergency? I don't, not at all. All right, Dan, I think that's it on the chats.
Yeah, and I don't see any hands raised. Good presentation, incidentally, here, Don.
Well, I shoot from the hip, and I apologize, but I'd like to make a turn and start doing things that really benefit the served agencies that actually matters to them.
Yes, 100%.
We're trying to promote, unless you get to know the people you work with during blue skies. If it's dark skies, nothing's going to happen because they don't know you, you don't know them, and there's no way to trust each other until you've drilled and you know the equipment beforehand and stuff like that. So this is all what we're all trying to preach to everybody.
I agree. Thank you for echoing that, because that is so true. I mean, the emergency managers, a lot of them came to me and said, you know, the attitude. I says, well, things have changed. Already they've changed. Think about it. If all these clubs, if all these different organizations have their system, which is all based on handheld only and CW only, HF, whatever, how much does that help an EOC? Now they're going to come to the table with WinLink or maybe a Wi-Fi mesh. That's going to take a little more time. That's where we can help.
Okay, Diana, you want to take the floor?
Yeah, thank you. Don, I'd like to show this presentation when it comes out to the emergency manager here at the tribe where I am. And I wondered if he has any questions. Could he talk to you? Because you brought up some key points. And, he's trying to do a lot of things all at once. He's a new
Yes.
emergency manager, and there
I'd
hadn't
be
been
more than
one
welcome.
for years.
Yeah,
So,
more than welcome to do that. I'm happy
okay,
to do
thank
that.
you. Great.
Okay, Tom, you got your hand up again. Go ahead. Tom? Hello, Tom.
We have been doing some work with the television, amateur radio television, for providing, street view information to the EOC so that they could sit some damage assessors in a room and they could tell us where they wanted us to be. And we would get somebody with a camera and a transceiver set there, and they'd send them what they wanted to see. So the evaluator was sitting in a room, nice and cool, calm and collected with the resources they needed. And they're just looking at the pictures. And when they say, we need the other side of the building, we trot the camera around there and do that. The problem that we have now is that amateur radio television is changing drastically. And it used to be true that if you just plugged an antenna into the cable television port of a television, you could transmit directly to it by setting it to certain cable frequencies. It'd come through as radio. But now with all the amateur radio television stuff changing, there isn't equipment readily available to do that anymore. You sort of have to build your own. It's a much higher level of complexity now. So if anybody's got an answer for that one, please send me an email, callsign@arrl.org. ARRL.net.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Okay, anybody? Okay, Dan, Low D Dan, he's back with us again. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, well, if you hear me slow down, it's because Starlink occasionally does drop a packet or two. But the reference to Arden Mesh and WinLink struck home because that was obviously the kinds of technology that amateurs could provide on a volunteer basis to their local EMAs. And the problem is this attitude thing that may never go away. If I understood John Peterson correctly, AUXCOMM was chosen because they did a, what do they call it, a group discussion about how to name a auxiliary communication service that amateur staffed and professional EMA directors just had a bad taste in their mouth about amateur radio operators. So we need to get over that by being forward looking and practical. And to that end, Arden and WinLink, I think, are going to see a real revolution as soon as Starlink becomes more readily available, especially if SpaceX is willing to cooperate at the federal level and make it accommodate priority traffic. So that's my 2 cents or $200 or nothing at all about one way to look at the future that would help small rural majority of all EMAs in the nation. So I'm just wondering how you thought about that.
Don?
With the Starlink, unfortunately, we saw a failure last week with the solar flare that took out too many. But the attitude issue, I think we can grow out of that. We just in the emergency management side of things, we have a hard relationship with the state because they buy us things we'll never use. And that's kind of like what ham radio does, is they bring capabilities we'll never use. One thing to realize, in a bad event, that's when we need you. The day-to-day, all those events I showed you, I didn't use a single ham radio during those events. Didn't need to. We had our backbone, our radio systems. We had all that capability. It's the bad day. It's the black swan that's going to be our problem. Now, The WinLink and the Wi-Fi mesh, one example I like to use, which it's been done and demonstrated, a hospital loses their internet capability, or that email is so critical to them, we could literally set up a Wi-Fi mesh within the hospital itself, point it outside to where we have HF capability and WinLink going. And there's a way to do this. I personally have not done this, but I've read about it, to where now the people in the hospital use their Outlook or whatever email there are, goes through that Wi-Fi mesh to the operators at ham that can send it out and then receive and push it back. So, you know, just that small of a footprint would be very beneficial.
Thank you, Don. Yeah, this has been an age-long program problem with hams. Clear back in what, 89, when I was dispatched with the Red Cross to go down to San Francisco for their disaster. I had to call security. They escort hams out of the area. They just wouldn't take no for an answer. And if they're not going to be good, they're a liability.
Can,
Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but the issue with hospitals is the cybersecurity issues promulgated by CISA are really extremely well-founded and difficult to comprehend unless you are a career IT security specialist. But one thing that Arden can do is you can broadcast a disconnected Wi-Fi signal through a window, and they can communicate out and address stuff via WinLink to regular email addresses, and you know, sort of soothe the fears of the internal IT people who just insist on air gapping everything associated with the hospital network.
Yeah, and that's very true. Smaller hospitals have different policies, and we all have, you know, policies from the feds, you know, protecting people's identity and stuff like that, which we'll have to follow. But yeah, there's hurdles out there. There are some.
Okay, Tom, you got your hand up again.
Yes, sir, I do. I just wanted to point out that just along with what Steve was saying, no, not Steve, Dan was saying, we have practiced setting up links in hospitals to get the signal out of the hospital. And then there's one other, so that we're not tied into the hospital network. We just put a link out to Mapen, which is something I just put a posting up, Mid-Atlantic IP network. And that stretches from southern Pennsylvania to southern Virginia. So it covers a lot of ground and will get us out of the affected area one way or another, unless it's one of those miserable ice storms that starts in Tennessee and doesn't finish up till it reaches Boston. Then it might get us. The other thing is that the system we're building out is specifically aimed at connecting EOCs and things like that. But Dawn, the presenter, something you mentioned during your presentation is true. When a community is cut off from their WinLink, there are some things we don't think about that can't happen. All the banking seems to be done over the internet. So when they want to check my damn debit card to see if I've got any money in it, if they can't do it, they can't sell me sandbags, let alone a bottle of iced tea. So what we did at one thing in Virginia, the Middle River floods back about a decade or two ago, we got a ridgeline thing on Virginia's point-to-point network, and then we aimed it down at the bank first and the hardware store second, and then the grocery store third. And you wouldn't have believed the complaining we got from other people who wanted, why are you giving it to the bank? Do they have the money? Why are you giving it to the hardware store? Why are you giving it to, so that people can buy groceries, you twit, so they can buy a shovel to shovel out their home, and so that they can get their card honored when they present it. You know, sometimes the general population is our worst enemy. And part of it is that we have some people, I work on my community's emergency preparedness committee. We have some people that refuse to stop believing that FEMA is supposed to be there tomorrow morning with a hot breakfast for them the day after the incident. They
No.
just won't be dissuaded, so there's more than one problem in the communication space.
And Tom, that's a really good point, and I want to echo something here. Serving the public can be just as important as serving the served agencies, because there's a need there. And just real quick, if you're not looking at chat, I'd like everybody to see Rob KG4OPX's message. It's really good. Thank you, Rob.
Okay, Oscar, you want to take the floor?
I'm reading Rob's message. 1 second. Okay, thank you. I just put on the chat a link that was this morning. I mean, during the before dawn yesterday evening. The Starlink satellites. They will show you the video of burning out in top of Puerto Rico. So if this is the newest emergency communication system, and it just got a storm and start to fail and collapse, that's something to consider. So I think we have a long way to go and keep having the emergency communications available in case of even the solar storm as well. So you can all download the link and see the video right away. So back to you, Don.
Okay. Don, go ahead. You got a comment?
No, it's Oscar's right though. Every new technology brings in new needs of emergency response as you rely on it as you move forward. I'll take examples: satellite phones, big deal during Hurricane Katrina. Yet the news media overwhelmed the satellite, and the first responders couldn't use them.
Lucky you guys. Dan, go ahead.
Okay, first of all, I got to full disclosure. I see clearly that Starlink has a long ways to go, but the media madness over this event is instructive. What happened was most of the 40 satellites that were taken out of service and that are shown in that video burning up on reentry were ones that had not yet been put into service. They were from the most recent liftoff, and Starlink did put out an advisory in red at the top of their app saying something weird's going on and we're looking into it as that was happening. So the whole thing about this is, I don't know, there's probably close to 2,000 satellites up there right now with only 15 to 1,600 of them in service. So when you talk about fault tolerance, resiliency, redundance, that constellation one is fully grown to the 4,400 that are licensed at one altitude, and then the other 8,000 that are at slightly below and slightly above it are going to provide the kind of resiliency and redundance that we've never seen. And unless, how do I say this? It'd be truly cataclysmic for what is being implied by showing the video of these burning on re-entry failed before they ever went into service satellites. And therefore, I think something worth working with. The majority of outages recorded worldwide on those that are in service are less than 2 seconds. And there's no known applications on the internet that don't buffer 2 seconds worth of streaming, even at super high resolutions. Now, it's not perfect, but it's better than anything else I can buy where I live. And it's worth putting up with. I'm working on the details of doing a failover to LTE-4 because that's the most cost-effective alternative, just to get out from under the crushing economic robbery of the local VDSL telco that requires we have a landline in order to get DSL. So, how do I say it? I sound excited about Starlink because I am. And at the same time, I'm acutely aware of the issues that it has to conquer to meet the strict specifications for a federally approved communication service that really wants to see 5 nines of availability. So, sort of just discarding it out of hand because it's first, I thought, very successful dealing with a somewhat cataclysmic CME in terms of their low Earth orbit satellites is a little disingenuous. And it's an easy trap to fall into. I've been there and done that over dozens of technologies. Hell, I used to think FirstNet was worth paying attention to.
And Dan, you bring up a good point. If I may echo something here, I have nothing against Starlink. It is something that has a future and so on and so forth. Fiber optic has issue. Wi-Fi has issue. Everything has issue. The issue, though, I would have is do not have that kind of conversation, though, with an emergency manager because he doesn't want it or she doesn't want to hear it. You need to follow what they need.
You don't argue with an EMA about anything because you're not only wasting your time then, you're wasting future potential time.
Correct. But thank you. No, I'm not against it. It's just one of its Achilles heels. Everything has those.
Yeah, well, good. Now I'm all happy again.
Well, their announcement today, they sounded real worried when they were shown on the television making the announcement, because 20 of their in-service satellites have been discovered to be in decaying orbits. And now they're trying to do an inventory and assessment on all the in-service satellites to find out if that problem is more widespread. But they looked a little worried around the earlobes, if you forgive my saying it. They weren't expecting that.
Well,
Okay, let's not just jump in here, folks. We're going to start doubling each other. Dan, go ahead and talk.
20 of these $500,000 satellites is a chunk of change. Of course they're worried.
Okay, are there any more questions out there? How's chat doing, Barry?
Everything's good in chat. Very good comments,
Yes.
but no real questions.
Okay. Okay. Any more people got their hand up? Want to put their hand up? Want to comment?
Thank you for doing this, Don.
Yes.
Thanks for bearing with me.
No, it was very good. And if you were, from what this presentation, if you were worried about opinion, it was a long ways from it. It was very well done.
Yeah, the people that were offended were the ones that didn't even show up.
Yes.
So
You nailed it, Steve. You really nailed it.
Okay. Making sure. Okay, Dan, got your hand up again.
Yeah, one last question, Don. What's the least populated county in Idaho in terms of people per square mile?
Oh my gosh, I'm not sure if it's Ahwahnee or I'm not positive, but it's in the southwest or southeast.
Now, we have counties that don't even have amateur radio operators at all. Kind of spread out there. But-
Coming from Alaska, that's a question that's dear to my heart.
And I see you survived Alaska. Okay, I'm looking for any more. Okay, Dave, we got somebody new here. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, well, here in Idaho County, we have the largest county in the state of Idaho. We have one stoplight, and that's in Grangeville.
Yeah, and Dave is correct because that's one of my neighbor's counties, but we have no stoplights at all in Clearwater.
Oh, gosh.
We have a lot of counties like this in Idaho, but so does other states. You look at Nevada, look at Montana, you look at these places. We often talk about the more populated areas and such, but we got to be, if you can take care of the little guy, the big guy's going to be taken care of. So you kind of focus on the Clearwater counties and these other folks, and then the 8 counties and the bigger metropolitan areas, wherever you might be, will automatically be taken care of. And that's my opinion.
I have nothing more. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Okay, Don, if you'll send me your slides, I appreciate that. I'm going
I'll
to
do that tonight.
Clearwater County is very lucky to have you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
We're lucky to have you.